and will gradually clear its way northwards. Still some heavy outbursts across initially northern areas, eventually reaching the Northern Isles later on. But again, for Northern Ireland, Wales and England, a largely dry day. This time the rest of the sunshine off towards the southwest. Eastern areas may stay that bit cloudier. Further rain into parts of the northwest as we head towards the middle part of the week as well. Bye-bye.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 o'clock. Happy Friday, one and all. On television, on radio, online, I should say, the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, my first on-air reaction to Rishi Sunak's conference speech, compared to the one I wrote for him earlier in the week. Who comes out on top? It is Sunak versus Dolan. My Mark Meets guest has gone from addiction and suicide to military hero, and now he's helping the likes of superstar Harry Kane. Former Marine Ben Williams tells his incredible and inspiring story before the end of the hour. In the big story, has last night's shock by-election victory in Scotland handed Labour the keys to number 10? And are the SNP and their dream of independence dead in the water? Looking forward to this in my take at 10, football legend Kevin Keegan is the latest victim of the woke mob for saying that only men should commentate on men's football. It's time to show those attacking him the red card. So 2 hours of big opinion, big debate and big entertainment. It is Friday. The weekend starts here. Let's have a laugh. Let's make a splash as well. A few fireworks tonight. Lots of debates, some really brilliant guests as well. We'll be remembering Lady Cathy Ferguson, the wonderful wife of Sir Alex Ferguson. She's died today. We'll speak to Sir Alex's biographer. So lots to get through. Kevin, Keegan, Rishi Sunak. It's all happening. First, the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you very much, and good evening. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. A man has been remanded in custody over an alleged plot to kidnap and kill TV presenter Holly Willoughby. Gavin Plum, a shopping centre security guard, is charged with soliciting a man to carry out the crimes. The star pulled out of hosting ITV's This Morning after bosses were reportedly aware and alerted to the possible threat. It's understood she's been given around-the-clock security and support. In other news, Labour is describing its Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election win as a seismic victory. Michael Shanks took the seat with 58% of the vote, more than double that of the SNP's Katie Loudon. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says Scotland is key to securing a majority at the next general election. While former First Minister and current Alba Party leader Alex Salmond says Humza Yousaf has days to save his job after the by-election defeat. Scotland's First Minister says the SNP needs time to reflect on that result.
The SNP, we didn't do enough. We know that there was contextual factors. Margaret Ferrier's reckless actions, the police investigation, of course. But we've got to reflect, I've got to reflect, the party has to ensure we've got a good campaign machine behind us, but also that we're inspiring people with a message. We clearly got a message from the voters of Rutherglen and Hamilton West that the SNP has lost some trust in that seat. We've got to make sure we regain it.
A key supporter of the Just Stop Oil protest group says he's redirecting his funding to a youth voting campaign. Green energy industrialist Dale Vince says he's given more than £340,000 since the group's foundation. But he says under the current government, protests cannot work, and he warns further disruption may prove counterproductive. Mr Vince is instead supporting a new cause aimed at encouraging young people to vote. Just Stop Oil says it will continue its campaign of civil resistance. A Conservative councillor has called for the Home Secretary's resignation over the handling of RAF Scampton. The government is accused of ignoring a legal order to stop converting the former airbase into a migrant camp to house 2,000 people. The Home Office says it's confident the project meets planning requirements, but Councillor Roger Patterson described the department as liars. And finally, while much of the UK could see temperatures of up to 26 degrees Celsius at the weekend, a warning for rain is in place for parts of Scotland. The Met Office has issued both amber and yellow rain warnings for large parts of Scotland and northern England from tomorrow until Sunday morning. ScotRail has announced there will be significant disruption to its services as a result. While in contrast, fine and dry weather for southern and central England, temperatures could rise as high as 25 degrees Celsius by Sunday afternoon. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio, and now on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Mark.
Thanks, Tatiana. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. Happy weekend, one and all. Now, in my big opinion, my first on-air reaction to Rishi Sunak's conference speech, compared to the speech that I wrote for him earlier in the week. Who comes out on top? It is Dolan versus Sunak. In the big story, has last night's shock by-election victory in Scotland handed Labour the keys to number 10? And are the SNP and the dream of independence now dead in the water? My Mark Meets guest has gone from addiction and suicide to military hero. And now he's helping the likes of football superstar Harry Kane. Former Marine Ben Williams tells his incredible and inspiring story before the end of the hour. In my Take at 10, football legend Kevin Keegan is the latest victim of the woke mob for saying that only men should commentate on men's football. Hardly controversial. It's time to show those attacking him the red card. Will Rishi Sunak's clear, no-nonsense definition of a woman win him the female vote at the next election? And are the BBC letting down listeners by axing local radio stations? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, BBC TV legend Sue Cook. Plus, we got tomorrow's front pages at 10:30 sharp with 3 top pundits who haven't been told what to say and who don't follow the script. Tonight, Nina Mishkov, David Oldroyd-Bolt and Linda Jubilee. Tonight, I'll be asking the pundits, as they lose a major backer, are Just Stop Oil running out of fuel? And after another crazy video emerges, do their supporters have a screw loose? Plus, following the very sad news that Sir Alex Ferguson's wife, Cathy, has passed away after 57 years of marriage, we'll be speaking to Sir Alex's biographer about the importance of this amazing lady in his life. Plus, the most important part of the show, your emails. They come straight to my laptop, mark@gbnews.com. And this show has a golden rule. We don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. A big 2 hours to come. We start with my big opinion. So Rishi Sunak finally made his conference speech, but how is it compared to the one that I wrote for him on Monday night? What you're about to see are clips from my proposed speech on Monday and what the PM actually said on Wednesday. Take a look. The immediate challenge for the economy is to get inflation down to 3%, which is like a tax cut for everyone. Once that's been achieved, taxes will come down across the board.
I know you want tax cuts. I want them too, and we will deliver them. But the best tax cut we can give people right now is to halve inflation and ease the cost of living.
So how will I achieve these tax cuts? 2 things. A government focused exclusively and aggressively on growth.
We need our economy to grow faster and for people across the country to feel the benefits of that.
Unless you're physically unable to, you will get back to work. Getting up in the morning, getting out of the house and putting a shift in has got to pay more than sitting at home receiving handouts at the taxpayer's expense.
We must end the national scandal where our benefit system declares that more than 2 million people of working age are incapable of actually doing any. That's not conservative. That's not compassionate. That must change.
The NHS is too bloated, too big, too inefficient, and employs too many diversity officers and not enough oncologists and nurses.
Our plan doubles the number of students training to be doctors and nurses, but it is also a reform plan for the NHS, with new ways of training and new roles, new ways of working, all driving up productivity.
These crossings are an economic, national security and humanitarian disaster.
Our new law will ensure that if you come here illegally, you will be detained and swiftly removed.
And I'm willing to exit the ECHR and do whatever else it takes to end this daily nightmare.
But know this, I will do whatever is necessary to stop the boats.
And I'm replacing net zero with what I'm calling smart net zero or smart zero.
So I decided to take a pragmatic, proportionate and realistic approach to reaching net zero.
Which means a long-term plan to reduce emissions, but one with 3 new red lines. Number 1, evidence-based science, so that we can have tangible proof that renewables and electric cars and windmills and all the rest of it are actually going to make a difference. Number 2, we will have the economy at the forefront, so we don't bankrupt ourselves or clobber hard-working Brits with crippling extra costs. And number 3, the will of the people, so that each and every one of you are aware of the costs, aware of the sacrifices needed, and support the plan.
But when I looked at the reality of what people were being asked to do, the thousands of pounds people would need to pay, all of that disproportionately falling on the poorest in society, by the way, and all of it not actually necessary in those time frames to meet our net zero targets, and in spite of us doing more than any other country, I concluded it simply wasn't right.
I will tackle crime, which is the new epidemic. Shoplifting, knife crime, burglaries, assault, it's getting out of hand. And I will create a culture in which people are afraid to break the law and afraid they will be caught. I will let police again.
In too many parts of our permanent state, virtue signalling has replaced common sense. As Suella has said, there is no such thing as a minor crime. If the police tolerate crime and antisocial behaviour in any form, we'll have more crime of all sorts. So that's why we now have record numbers of police officers. And every crime should be investigated. Our streets will be safer, our communities more secure. No one should be afraid to walk home alone at night.
It's not acceptable for civil servants to be brainwashed into ideas like critical race theory, which divides our communities and goes against the wise words of Martin Luther King, who aspired to a colour-blind society.
The people of North Yorkshire were not interested in my colour, but my character. Never let anyone tell you that this is a racist country. It is not. My story is a British story. A story about how a family can go from arriving here with little to Downing Street in 3 generations.
It's not acceptable for the NHS to refer to women as birthing humans, cis females or chest feeders. I'll make sure that the public sector embraces the fundamental facts of human biology.
Patients should know when hospitals are talking about men or women.
I will restore what it is to be a woman and protect it in law. And let me put this on record. 0 women have penises. Not even the butch ones.
And we shouldn't get bullied into believing that people can be any sex they want to be. They can't. A man is a man and a woman is a woman.
I will be Britain's first anti-woke Prime Minister.
That's just common sense.
And there you have it. I couldn't have put it better myself. So, who wins, Dolan or Sunak? Your verdict on Rishi Sunak's speech and how it compared to the speech that I wrote for him on Monday night. I'd say Sunak did well, but didn't go far enough. Let's get reaction from my top pundits tonight. Fleet Street legend Nina Mishkov, historian and political commentator David Oldroyd-Bolt, and journalist, broadcaster and podcast host Linda Jubilee. Linda, your verdict on the great battle, Dolan versus Sunak. Who won?
Done, actually.
You're not just saying that. You're not just saying that because you're on the payroll.
I think that he made a clever speech. I do a lot of public speaking training for people, and I think it was a clever speech. It was a good speech. It wasn't barnstorming by any stretch of the imagination, but he's never going to be a great orator. I think you have to agree that. I think he could have gone a little bit further, but actually, I think he nailed it.
How about you, Nina? You can be honest. You can be brutal. You normally are.
He could be preaching to the converted, is what I think. I expected, actually, having seen those two compared, that they've somehow airbrushed out the strings, like you were, you know, he was your puppet, and they've airbrushed that out. Very clever. No, I mean, it was a very good Tory speech, and much better than people would have expected. But on the other hand, where were his 5 pledges that he's been banging on about? Judge me on my 5 pledges. What is it? You know, halve inflation, bring down the waiting lists...
Stop the boats.
Stop the boats, and Uncle Tom Cobley and all, and a partridge and a pear tree, whatever it is. Not a word. And while he's talking about, you know, everybody having to do English and maths till the age of 18, completely missing out the point that children are now in crumbling, dangerous school buildings. Nothing about that, nothing. We will fix this quickly. So it's all nothing to see here. We're looking into the future. So there was nothing really practical that's going to help real people, ordinary people who are struggling with finance and heating bills coming up in a couple of months. There was nothing concrete for them.
Speaking of which, no house building either.
No, nothing about house building. And that's the one thing this country's crying out for. We're desperate for houses.
OK, well, what do you think about this speech from Sunak, David? Because we've noticed a change in tone and policy from Sunak over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Was that writ large in his speech today? Did it feel, on Wednesday, did it feel like a radical speech?
Not particularly. It felt like a speech that Tony Blair could have made. And indeed, his entire delivery reminds me, more than anything else, more than any Tory leader, he reminds me of Tony Blair.
The man who won 3 elections.
Exactly. He's copying that sort of compassionate eyes, nice hands, soft demeanour, because he thinks it's going to help him win back the middle ground. He needs to retain a small majority at the next election, which I still think is probably Even's outlook, along with Labour being largest party but not majority. As for the actual policy, it was absolutely lukewarm. There was nothing for either the really, hard Tories who want zero migration, who want reducing debt now. Pinning your hopes on bringing down inflation when we have an independent Bank of England is ludicrous. He has zero control over this. It's entirely down to Andrew Bailey and the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England to do what they can.
Well, he can stand up to the striking unions and he can cut spending. That's certainly 2 levers.
Cutting spending will have, at this time, a very limited effect on inflation. I just don't think there was enough there of any real substance, and it came across to me as yet another cleverly focused group triangulated speech with zero bottom, zero impact and zero effect on people's lives.
You're going to have to get off that fence.
Pass me a ladder.
I was going to say, I'm interested in you think that they might have a chance. In the by-election in Scotland, the Conservative lost his deposit.
Well, yes, but this is Scotland.
I know. but still, that's a bit of an indication.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because coming up next in the big story, has last night's shock by-election victory in Scotland handed Labour and Keir Starmer the keys to number 10? And are the SNP and their dream of independence now dead in the water? We'll speak to 2 top experts north of the border. That is next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, on Monday, I presented the show 9 to 11, and let me tell you that I wrote Rishi Sunak's conference speech in advance, so he didn't have to. And then, of course, we had his speech on Wednesday. So tonight's Big Opinion was a mixture of my speech suggestions and Sunak's. What is your verdict? Who won, Dolan versus Sunak? Well, Richard says, your speech, don't forget to put an invoice in for writing the Prime Minister's speech. Unfortunately, it's made as much difference in the polls as a lead balloon. Alan says, do one for Starmer tomorrow. Alan, I'm not sure I get paid enough to put myself through that. Sandra says, hi, Mark. I guess everything you said represented most of the British public, but whether or not Sunak will get in is another matter. Boris would have. Stuart, Mark Dolan for PM, says Stuart. Clearly been on the sherbets, but thank you, Stuart. Richard, yes, but Sunak's speech has gone down like a lead balloon. Actions speak louder than words, says Richard. And last but not least, Adrian, Mark at GBnews.com. Adrian says, Dolan for PM. I say, well done, mate. A lot better than Starmer's speech will be. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we will have in-depth coverage of the Labour Party conference from Sunday. That's right, Mark Dolan tonight, looking at all the implications of what could be the next government of this country. Well, it's time now for the big story, and Labour has triumphed in the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election in Scotland, with Sir Keir Starmer hailing it a seismic result for his party. Michael Shanks replaces the former MP Margaret Ferrier, who was ousted from her seat in August following a successful recall petition for breaching COVID restrictions during the lockdown of 2020. So what are the implications of this result? If Labour pick up 50 or more seats north of the border, does that all but guarantee that a Labour government will happen at the next election? And what does this mean for the SNP and their dream of independence? To discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome Scottish political commentator Dr. Stuart Waiton and journalist and former BBC presenter Ian McWhirter, whose article in this week's Spectator magazine is headlined, "The SNP Hegemony in Scotland is over." Well, gentlemen, welcome to the show. Stuart, let me start with you. There is one clear winner in all of this, isn't there? Keir Starmer.
Well, that's the outcome, but I think more than anything, what we're witnessing in Scotland is the implosion of the SNP. I think that's the dynamic, and it would have been a surprise if anyone other than Labour had actually won the election. So I think that's the interesting thing. I mean, at the level of politics, my big concern is that I can't see any difference between the Labour Party and the SNP other than the question of independence on any of the major issues. I hardly saw politics in this discussion. And that's the thing that's really peculiar at the minute. I'm doing a lot of work in education, and where I see a lot of discussion about values is in schools where teachers are teaching social justice values to pupils. And that's where you get the politics. You get identity politics in school, and then you come to an election like this, and I don't see any politics, and certainly no difference between the politics of Labour and the SNP, unfortunately.
So what you're saying, Stuart, is that Labour are just as woke as the SNP?
Yeah, essentially. And if you look at all the votes over the last 15 years and their attitudes towards education, their attitudes towards the trans question, the adoption of critical race theory in schools, environmentalism in the curriculum, it's almost like they're bypassing adults and having a discussion about values, or rather enforcing a discussion of values onto children.
Ian, great to have you on the show. What does last night's result mean for the future of the SNP and independence?
It's highly significant. I mean, for once, Keir Starmer was absolutely right when he said that they've blown the doors off. They have blown the doors off the SNP in Scotland. This is the beginning of the end of the SNP's decade-long hegemony in Scotland. And it's not just because this is one result, a stunning result, that it is, but also because it confirms a general run of opinion polls which indicated there's been a massive switch across to Labour in Scotland, away from the SNP. And this is only going to build up in the next 12 months before the next general election, because people are going to have the choice now in Scotland. They're going to say, do you want to vote for the SNP, as you have done in the past 10 years, and achieve mediocrity, as is evidently been the case, or do you want to make a big change? You can change the government in Westminster. That's the deal that Labour is going to be offering them, and it's a very persuasive one. You've got to remember that before 2015, Scotland had always been a Labour-dominated country. In 2010, the general election in 2010, Labour returned 41 seats in Scotland. The SNP returned 6. Now, in this showing, on Ruthergend's showing, they'll get back nearly all of those 40 seats. And as everyone says, the road to number 10 for Labour goes through Scotland, and it looks like this is going to deliver a working majority for Keir Starmer.
Well, yes, and of course, Ian, if Labour do well in Scotland, it takes the pressure off them to win back the red wall, which could be tight.
Exactly. And I think, though I understand Stuart's dismay about the drift of intellectual policy and attitudes in academia in particular and in politics, but I think he's missing something very important in Scotland that this by-election results has underlined. There's been a significant sea change in attitudes in Scotland. If you look at Labour's policies in recent months, they've been tacking quite significantly to the right. In 2019, the SNP was significantly, Labour rather, was significant to the left of the SNP when Jeremy Corbyn was in charge. Now they are significantly to the right. In all the key issues that Stuart had mentioned there, gender, for example, a year ago, the Labour Party leader in Scotland, Anas Sarwar, whipped his MPs to vote for the Gender Recognition Reform Scotland Bill. It's hugely divisive and highly contentious piece of legislation which would allow 16-year-olds to change their sex merely by making a declaration. He's now opposed to that. Labour is now opposed to that. Labour now says men are men, women are women, and you can't change sex, just exactly as Rishi Sunak. If you look at welfare, Labour now accepts the Conservatives' two-child cap on child benefits, which Labour used to call the rape clause. Big significant change there as well. Labour also, of course, now accepts Brexit and, of course, is totally opposed to any independence referendum in Scotland. And even if you take energy, the rhetoric from Labour has changed very significantly on that as well, on net zero. You know, the SNP says, well, like the Greens, we've got to keep Scotland's oil and gas in the ground. We don't want any of it to come out. We don't want Rosebank. We don't want Cambo. Now Labour is accepting that the Rosebank highly controversial oil and gas field should be developed. And he's also saying that fossil fuels will be around for decades to come. So there's a whole range of issues in which Labour has moved very significantly, if you like, to the right. And in fact, I mean, in many respects, it's now occupying not just SNP territory, but Conservative territory in Scotland. Conservatives are nowhere. They came nowhere in Rutherglen. They lost a deposit. But Labour is now taking over their positions, most notably on tax, because this has been the defining issue for Humza Yousaf since he took over the SNP in Scotland. He says he wants to increase taxes even more on people earning more than £50,000 a year. Labour has now said, no, we're not having that anymore. We don't want any more tax. We're not getting any value from it. And Labour now has a presumption against tax increases in Scotland. That's a huge change. So, I mean, you know, you're seeing a very significant development here ideologically and constitutionally as well.
It's fascinating.
What Rutherglen tells you is that independence and an independence referendum for Scotland is off the agenda.
Off the agenda. Fascinating stuff. Stuart, last but not least to you, Labour now have a very good leader in Anas Sarwar, a very articulate guy, popular figure in Scottish politics. Do you think the SNP are ruining the day they elected Humza Yousaf? And do you agree that independence is now gone for a generation?
I think there's a problem with independence, especially when Scotland appears quite static, especially economically. And I think the SNP, working in cahoots with the Greens, have looked a little bit otherworldly in terms of how do we get out of the problems that we have. Humza Yousaf is not a popular politician. I think the idea that the SNP are competent, which is a kind of key thing, and having a statesman-like leader with Nicola Sturgeon, whatever you think of her, she was very, very competent. And so that dynamic, that sense of a statesman-like leader has had a huge blow. And of course, so I still think the dynamic is more to do with the collapse of the SNP. And to some extent, I think the independence question has been undermined by the SNP's, what's happened to the SNP over the last 6 months. Whether Labour are really shifting to the right, if you want to call it that, I don't know what right and left means anymore. I don't know. I suspect perhaps opportunistically, but I suppose that's not a bad thing because they should be trying to reflect the electorate rather than force their values on the electorate. But I'm not going to hold my breath on that one, but we'll wait and see.
What a fascinating debate. Stuart and Ian, thank you so much for your valuable time. Dr. Stuart Waiton and Ian McWhirter weighing in on what was a massive result for Labour in Scotland last night. Let me know your thoughts. Has the success in that by-election north of the border gifted Keir Starmer the keys to number 10? And also, is the SNP's dream of independence now gone for a generation? Let me know your thoughts. Coming up in tonight's Top Pundits, as they lose a major backer, are Just Stop Oil running out of fuel? Plus, after another crazy video emerges, do their supporters have a screw loose? Plus, following the very sad news that Sir Alex Ferguson's wife, Cathy, has passed away after 57 years of marriage, we'll speak to Sir Alex's biographer about the importance of this amazing lady in his life. Plus, we've been asking you, will Rishi Sunak's no-nonsense definition of a woman win him the female vote at the next election? The results are in. I shall reveal all next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30am.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, I've been conducting an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll. We've been asking, will Rishi Sunak's no-nonsense definition of a woman win him the female vote at the next election? The results are in, and it's good news for the PM. 65% say yes, while 35% will say no. I'll be debating that with BBC TV news legend Sue Cook in the next hour. Now, Lady Cathy Ferguson, the wife of the former Manchester United manager Sir Alex Ferguson, and the woman he called his bedrock, has died at the age of 84. A Glasgow native, Cathy Holding, met her husband-to-be whilst they were working together in a typewriter factory in 1964. They were married 2 years later and went on to raise 3 children and 12 grandchildren over a course of a relationship that lasted for more than half a century. For reaction to this very sad news, I'm delighted to welcome television news journalist and the author of The Boss, The Many Sides of Alex Ferguson, Michael Crick. Michael, thank you for joining us at short notice. Just how important a figure was Lady Cathy in Sir Alex's life?
Well, very, very important indeed. And the fact that the marriage lasted more than 50 years says it all, I think. I mean, Alex Ferguson, inevitably, during his time as a star in football, will have met many glamorous women, very many women who are perhaps more sophisticated. But throughout that time, he was utterly devoted to Cathy. They had their ups and downs, they had their rocky moments, but he owed her a huge amount. She basically is the only woman, probably, or the only person that he was, I think, frightened of, terrified of. And she ran the home when Ferguson was out often night after night after night, not just managing his football clubs, but in the 1970s, he also ran a couple of pubs. And if he wasn't going to football matches all over Scotland, he was making meals in his bar, Fergie's, and she barely saw him apart from on Sundays. And it was her job to bring up the 3 young boys who all went on into successful careers. She was a formidable woman. I met her once, actually, at a party, and we had quite a conversation. The trouble was that her Glaswegian accent was so strong that I could only understand about half of what she said. But she clearly was a very formidable woman, and she played a huge role in his career, actually, at key moments when he might have moved, to go and play football for Nottingham Forest in 1969, or later on, Ferguson agreed to go and manage Tottenham Hotspur in 1985. It was a deal. He did it with the Spurs chairman. And apparently Cathy Ferguson said, no, I don't want to go and live in London. We're staying here in Aberdeen. And it was only the following year that she was persuaded that by the compromise of going to live in Manchester. But even then, when Ferguson got new jobs, he was often away. He was away for 9 months living in Manchester before she came down with the boys. She was, she didn't like football, really. She very rarely went to matches. She thought it was a trivial game, and I suppose she was right. And, at home, I think she was the boss. And, of course, everywhere else, Sir Alex was the boss.
Well, indeed. Briefly, if you can, Michael, just to touch on the religious divide. Sir Alex Ferguson faced prejudice, didn't he, for his choice of Cathy as his wife, because he was a Protestant and her family were Catholic.
Yeah, they got married in a registry office in Glasgow in 1966. In the morning, Catholic and Protestant, very controversial in those days in the highly charged and bigoted atmosphere of the west of Scotland. And he went off to play football in the afternoon and then went off to a European fixture with Dunfermline the following week. But when he was at Rangers a year or two later, there was a lot of Glasgow Rangers, an incredibly bigoted club in those days. They hadn't had a Catholic player since the First World War. And a lot of the directors and people at Rangers and the fans were deeply suspicious of Ferguson himself for marrying a Catholic. And his time at Rangers was probably the worst part of his entire football playing career. And eventually he had to leave. That was the atmosphere in Scotland at that time. Of course, Ferguson was not, those kind of prejudices meant nothing. He was very angry about it. But it was a terribly unfortunate incident. But he himself, not only did he marry Cathy, but his parents and his grandparents had also had marriages that crossed the divide, which is, quite unusual for Scotland in those days.
Indeed so. Look, and I've only got a couple of seconds, Michael. Great to have you on the show. Ultimately, this relationship was underpinned by a deep mutual respect and deep love.
Indeed. And it was very touching, really, the devotion he had to Cathy. And, when but she prolonged his career at United, thank goodness. You know, he announced he was going to retire in 2002, and she said, "I don't want you at home mooching around and moaning all the time. Get back to United." And he did, and he gave the club another 11 years, and they won the league about 6 times and the European Cup again. So she did a huge amount, actually, to make Ferguson into the legend that he became.
Michael, come and see us again in the studio soon. My thanks to Sir Alex's biographer. He has written The Boss, The Many Sides of Sir Alex, which is out now. It came out a few years ago. Michael Crick. Thanks, Michael. Now, reacting to the big stories of the day, tonight's top pundits, Fleet Street legend Nina Mishkov, historian and political commentator David Oldroyd-Bolt, and journalist and broadcaster, host of the Common Sense podcast, which is very popular. It's nearly as popular as mine. The Mark Dolan way.
Not less so.
There you go. Linda Jubilee. Now, in a developing story, football club owner, Ecotricity founder and Labour donor Dale Vince has announced this evening that he will stop funding the eco-campaign group Just Stop Oil and instead spend the cash on campaigning for a new government in the run-up to the next election. He said it had become clear to him that no amount of protesting and direct action would prevent the government from drilling in the North Sea. He will instead focus his efforts on supporting Just Vote 24, a campaign group which says it aims to empower the younger generation, especially first-time voters, to exercise their right to vote. Meanwhile, one of Just Stop Oil's increasingly unhinged campaigners made quite a name for herself on Sky News this week. Take a listen.
How worse does it have to get? How many kids have to die? How many more young people have to do this stuff? I don't know what else to say, Anna. Why aren't you on the streets with us? That's all I can say.
Someone pass her a hanky. So, are Just Stop Oil running out of fuel, and do their supporters have a screw loose? What do you think? Is it the beginning of the end for Just Stop Oil if they're going to lose a multi-million-pound backer?
What I think here is the backer has strategically done exactly the right thing. I'm not saying I agree with him. I'm not saying I agree with Stop Oil. But if I knew that I wasn't having any impact at all on the government and the government was just going to go ahead with policies I didn't agree with, I'd take my money out and I'd put it elsewhere, and I'd put it exactly where he's going to put it. So he hasn't said who he's going to back. He's not necessarily going to funnel all this money to the Labour Party. But what he has said is that he is going to go for people who weren't old enough to vote last time or who were too apathetic for vote last time, but they may not be this time, because I can assure you, when I talk to my children, who are all adults, what they care about in the next election is the environment. They care about housing too, but I know, because they've told me, they care about the environment. He stands a reasonable chance. Again, I'm not saying he's right, I'm saying I understand his strategy. He is going to put money and effort into getting younger voters into the mix.
Now, this move by Dale Vince helps Keir Starmer, doesn't it? Because now a major Labour backer is not supporting Just Stop Oil. That was something that was being weaponised by the government, by the Conservatives.
It does, and it reminds me actually of Sir James Goldsmith in 1997 setting up the referendum party to take votes away from the Conservatives because he thought they'd been utterly useless and wet on Europe, and in doing so probably helped Tony Blair get across the line with such an enormous majority. These kind of individuals with great funds at their disposal taking on a popular cause, or in this case a cause that is popular with a certain and influential part of the electorate, can really make a difference. I think it's very good he's stopped funding Just Stop Oil, which is a totally destructive movement, and I felt terribly sorry for all those people at Les Miserables this week whose trip to London was ruined by this, because these are the very people that the Labour Party is supposed to stand up for. You would imagine people who come to London rarely and put a lot of time and effort into doing so, and to have it destroyed in this way was absolutely callous. And besides which, Just Stop Oil makes no difference. I think everything they do hardens voters against them. It makes people think, if you are in favour of these policies, I'm adamantly against them because you are such dreadful people.
Yes, if anyone didn't know that story, Just Stop Oil stormed a performance of Les Miserables in central London. Really bad news for the punters, except those who don't enjoy musicals. Yeah. Nina,
yes,
you saw that video of that lady on Sky News, very distressed, very hysterical. Not the first, and there will be others. Do these people have a screw loose?
I think a screw loose is kind of really a bit patronising. She obviously cares so passionately and can't understand why the rest of the world doesn't go along with her, and perhaps it's taken over her life.
But detached from reality? Hysterical?
I don't know if it's detached from reality, but so passionate that all her focus is on this. The thing is about the Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, all these people, when they first started out, I think a lot of us were very sympathetic because you can see the point, climate change, all of that. Particularly, for instance, the ones who are gluing themselves to the road. Not that I like that bit about insulation and insulating homes, because that makes enormous sense to insulate homes, and why
it does.
Our building regulations are so crap that we haven't built houses that have got insulation, and now we're trying to play catch-up.
Insulating homes is not a wacko idea.
No, it's not a wacko idea. But the trouble is they've gone about this the wrong way. And from the start, because in Extinction Rebellion, I was seeing them, marching down the street at Camden High Street, and I was standing there saying, OK, right. And I thought, well, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? And, it's like, what do you want? I don't know. When do you want it? Not sure. What can I do? Don't know.
OK.
You need to know. So, like Michael Moore in America...
Documentary maker, great guy.
He would take it to the oil companies, and that's where he would make his big protest.
OK. All right, well, look, what do you think? Are supporters of Just Stop Oil suffering mental health issues? Have they got a screw loose, or is that harsh language? Let me know. Mark@gbnews.com. Coming up in my Take at 10, football legend Kevin Keegan is the latest victim of the woke mob for saying only men should commentate on men's football. Hardly controversial. It's time to show those attacking him the red card. That's my Take at 10. But first, my Mark Meets guest has gone from addiction and suicide to military hero. And now he's helping the likes of superstar Harry Kane. Find out more next.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30am.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7pm.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11pm for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11pm every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11am on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6pm, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel
Is Kevin Keegan a sexist dinosaur? That's the topic of my take at 10. You won't want to miss it, let me tell you. But first, this. Yes, it's Mark Meets, and this evening Ben Williams was struggling with drug addiction and battling suicidal thoughts when he saw an advert for the Royal Marines Commandos that changed his life forever. Serving 10 years, he learned the important lessons of purpose, integrity, motivation and teamwork. Since leaving the military, he's been helping high-performance companies and professional sports teams, including the England football squad, coaching them in the run-up to their successful performance at the 2018 World Cup. His inspiring book is called Commando Mindset. Find your motivation, realise your potential, achieve your goals, and the book is winning rave reviews. I'm delighted to say Ben Williams joins me now. Ben, great to have you in the studio. Can we talk about the beginning? You struggled with drug addiction, suicidal thoughts. Tell me more about your life at that time.
I was a very lost individual, and I believe I didn't have the role models in my life at the time that could guide me to where I needed to be and who I needed to be. And I found myself in a place of those thoughts and using drugs as an escape for what I was feeling and thinking. And actually the Royal Marines advert was something that almost reached out and grabbed me and said to me, your purpose is here, it exists here. And that sent me on the path to become a Royal Marines Commando.
Remarkable. You saw the advert. What a moment of destiny for you. What made you go for it?
Being outside my comfort zone and thinking, this is something I should be doing, something I'm compelled to do. When I was 8 years old, I had the cam cream on, I'd go to the Royal Marines Museum, and it was part of who I was, it's what I wanted to be. But I lost that along the way as a young adult, and fortunately the advert found me to put me on that track.
And so what did life in the Marines, 10 years, give you as a person?
Lots of ups and downs, lots of challenges. The biggest thing, though, it surrounded me with people who I needed to be around. Role models, people that I could look up to, a motivated group of individuals who were operationally, professionally focused. We had ethos, we had values, we had a spirit.
Discipline,
structure, but something more than that. The spirit amongst all of us as Royal Marines is something you can't really replace anywhere else. And I use that role model word very clearly. I think a lot of that is actually missing in what we need within society at the moment, especially people like me, between the ages of 20 and 35 years old. Who do we look up to? Where do we find our superheroes? And fortunately for me, I got to spend 10 years alongside some of them.
Well, I think it's great, and I think the message you've got is very authentic and probably more useful than Andrew Tate or Jordan Peterson, perhaps, you know, because what you're offering is authentic life lessons, great tools with which to move forward. So if I've got viewers and listeners, because you're now also a professional coach as well, helping people to achieve more in their lives. If I've got viewers and listeners who feel stuck, whose lives are not where they want them to be, or perhaps in a bad relationship, how can they provoke that change? How can they get out of the rut?
Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Most of our self-induced problems, exactly where I found myself, were induced by comfort, and comfort is shrouded by fear.
Right.
And we have this relationship with fear in this modern society that it's a bad thing, but fear is a really good thing. It shows you where you can go. It shows you that, yes, there may be risk, there may be harm, but there may be good on the other side of that. And when we can work with fear as opposed to against it, we end up having those lives where we find more purpose, more fulfillment. I'm a coach and I'm an author. I'm now a tech founder, and our purpose is around ensuring that we help other people use our technology to live more fulfilled lives, better lives. It takes a lot of fear to push through and work with in order to find that purpose in life. I get imposter syndrome all the time, sat out there.
Never.
Listen, but it's there, and people, it's that fear that you need to get comfortable with.
Well, that is brilliant. I know the book is like a roadmap for the life that you want to have, and we're going to flash up the details of the book in just a moment. You've helped elite sports stars, including the England squad in the run-up to the 2018 World Cup. You've been working with people like Harry Kane. What did you say to Harry Kane?
Harry Kane and people just like Harry have incredible mindsets, and it takes a lot to tap into that mindset, and they're in the position they are now.
But they still need your help, right?
Yeah, and when we worked with them as part of the Royal Marines and afterwards, it was about values. How do you instill values into a group of individuals that come from different clubs, where they can come together and have a unite set of values that can put them on the train towards success. And you can see it in the recent World Cups and Euros that it clearly works. And even now, Harry's reporting about how they still reference the Royal Marines' values many years on.
And what about that fear mindset? Because fear is built into the human psyche, isn't it? It's probably a survival instinct. So if I've got viewers and listeners who are just afraid of making the leap, you know, maybe quitting their job and doing what they really want to do, or ending a relationship, how can you break through fear?
You need to be driven by something that inspires you.
Right.
You have to have something driving
so the
you
goal
that
pulls
inspires
you through it.
Exactly. It pulls you through. That helps you build courage. And as I wrote about in the book, it drives enactment. But there's another part to it, which is surround yourself with excellence. Surround yourself with people who are better than you. And whether that's through the form of using products like we're building at Lupin, or whether it's through reading books or following the right people, you will find advice and knowledge and wisdom that I think many people are lacking at the moment that they need.
More power to you. The book is out. Dominique, let's have the old screen grab if I can. And it's Commando Mindset. OK, it's a bestseller. It's winning rave reviews. And it's out now. There it is. Find your motivation, realise your potential, achieve your goals. It's by Ben Williams. Ben, come back and see us soon. You've put me in a really good mood. You've motivated me for the weekend. OK, folks, next up is Kevin Keegan, a sexist dinosaur. I don't think so. That's the topic of my take at 10. You won't want to miss it.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Friday, the weekend starts here. What have you got planned? Are you working? Have you got some time off? Either way, let's make it a good one. You are watching Mark Dolan Tonight. It is 10 o'clock on TV, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. A busy show for you. In my take at 10, football legend Kevin Keegan is the latest victim of the woke mob for saying only men should commentate on men's football. Hardly controversial, it's time to show those attacking him the red card. Will Rishi Sunak's clear, no-nonsense definition of a woman win him the female vote at the next election? And are the BBC letting down listeners by axing local radio stations? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, BBC TV legend Sue Cook. Plus tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits. So, a packed show, lots to get through. Is Kevin Keegan a sexist dinosaur? That is the topic of my take at 10. It's in 3 minutes' time. I'm not pulling my punches. I won't be censored. I won't be silenced. It's not in my nature. So, a busy hour to come. Don't go anywhere. First, the news with a good friend of mine, Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you, and good evening. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. A man has been remanded in custody over an alleged plot to kidnap and kill TV presenter Holly Willoughby. Gavin Plum, a shopping centre security guard, is charged with soliciting a man to carry out the crimes. The star pulled out of hosting ITV's This Morning after bosses were reportedly alerted to the possible threat. It's understood she's been given round-the-clock security and support. Labour's describing its Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election win as a seismic victory. Michael Shanks took the seat with 58% of the vote, more than double that of the SNP's Katie Loudon. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says Scotland is key to securing a majority at the next general election. Former First Minister and current Alba Party leader Alex Salmond says Humza Yousaf has days to save his job after the by-election defeat. Scotland's First Minister says the SNP needs time to reflect on the result.
The SNP, we didn't do enough. We know that there was contextual factors. Margaret Ferrier's reckless actions, the police investigation, of course. But we've got to reflect, I've got to reflect, the party has to ensure we've got a good campaign machine behind us, but also that we're inspiring people with a message. We clearly got a message from the voters of Rutherglen and Hamilton West that the SNP has lost some trust in that seat. We've got to make sure we regain it.
A key supporter of the Just Stop Oil protest group says he's redirecting his funding to a youth voting campaign. Green energy industrialist Dale Vince says he's given more than £340,000 since the group's foundation. But he says under the current government, protest cannot work, and he warns further disruption may prove counterproductive. Mr Vince is instead supporting a new cause aimed at encouraging young people to vote. Just Stop Oil says it will continue its campaign of civil resistance. In other news, a Conservative councillor has called for the Home Secretary's resignation over the handling of RAF Scampton. The government's accused of ignoring a legal order to stop converting the former airbase into a migrant camp to house 2,000 people. The Home Office says it's confident the project meets planning requirements, but Councillor Roger Patterson described the department as liars. And while much of the UK could see temperatures of up to 26 degrees Celsius at the weekend, a warning for rain is in place in parts of Scotland. The Met Office has issued both amber and yellow rain warnings for large parts of Scotland and northern England from tomorrow until Sunday morning. ScotRail has announced there'll be significant disruption to its service as a result. In contrast, fine and dry weather for southern and central England. Temperatures could rise as high as 25 degrees by Sunday afternoon. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio, and now on your smart speaker by simply saying play GB News. Now it's back to Mark.
Thanks, Tatiana. She returns in an hour's time. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. Will Rishi Sunak's clear, no-nonsense definition of a woman win him the female vote at the next election? And are the BBC letting down listeners by axing local radio stations? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, BBC TV legend Sue Cook, live in just a few minutes. Plus tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from my top pundits. Nina Mishkov, David Oldroyd Bolt, no less, and the brilliant Linda Jubilee. They'll be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros. So look, a packed hour to come. Those papers are on the way, but first, My take at 10, and poor old Kevin Keegan. The footy legend Kevin Keegan certainly has a pair of balls. He's upset the woke mob by complaining about female pundits commentating on men's football. The soccer icon, who played for and managed England, said he had a problem with an England lady footballer providing expert analysis of a match involving the men's England side. In comments reported by The Times, he told guests at a football event, "I don't like to listen to ladies talking about the England men's team at the match because I don't think it's the same experience. I have a problem with that." Well, this icon of the men's game has been condemned for his, and I quote, archaic, nonsensical and uneducated remarks. However, these days, being called uneducated and being ordered to go and educate yourself is doublespeak for you have the wrong opinions which do not fit the prescribed political narrative, and you need to fix your thinking. You need to change your unwelcome, unfashionable thoughts. But people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Former England striker and top pundit Eni Aluko dubbed Keegan a dinosaur. Oh dear, isn't that a bit, ageist? After all, Keegan is 72. To call someone a dinosaur is a direct allusion to their age. But that's OK. You're allowed offensive slurs if you're on the right side of the argument. Perhaps more egregiously, Aluko, who is a huge talent in the game, I'm a big fan, told The Telegraph no one wants to hire dinosaurs, so his view is really his problem. No one wants to hire dinosaurs. Wow. Nice flavour of cancel culture thrown in there. Yeah, let's stop the guy earning a living for wrongthink. Welcome to 2023. Yvonne Harrison, the CEO of Women in Football, claimed Keegan's comments were symptomatic of widespread misogyny faced by women within the game. Now, that may well be the case. Sexism in football is real and it's appalling. But this is a deeply unfair interpretation of Keegan's words. Far be it from me to defend the guy. His language about ladies and all the rest of it was a bit clumsy. But it's quite clear what he's saying, which is that those offering commentary and punditry on, for example, Premier League men's football or the national game ought to be people who have played at that level, which would be, check notes, former Premier League or ex-England male footballers. It cuts both ways. I don't think retired male tennis players should be commentating on top-level women's tennis. John McEnroe, for all his trophies, should not be a pundit on matches featuring Emma Raducanu or the Williams sisters. It should be Martina Navratilova or Chris Evert. Now, the aforementioned Yvonne Harrison, a great champion of women in football, fair play, has unfortunately taken the language up a level by calling this gender apartheid in football. What? To invoke the evil crimes of the South African regime in the 80s, in which people lived drastically different lives based upon their skin colour, in a debate about who sits in a TV studio is, in my view, deeply offensive and trivialises that horrific original crime. It's like virtue signalling commentators who disgracefully invoke the Holocaust to win any argument on Twitter. Now, it's my view that female broadcasters in men's football have made a brilliant contribution, and I'd like to see more. I've got no problem with Alex Scott presenting Football Focus. She replaced Dan Walker, who, let's be honest, has never kicked a ball in his life. Jackie Oatley, Claire Balding, Sue Barker, Laura Woods, among the best sports presenters out there. But surely the pundits on the sofa and in the commentary box should be ex-pros from the game they're watching. They should surely have played at that level in order to be credible. Kevin Keegan is getting slated for saying what many people think, which, of course, is the norm now in the clown world of 2023. The backlash against his comments, in which he spoke highly of women's football, is typical of how everything has become politicised, and anyone not aligned to the religious woke scripture will have all hell unleashed upon them. Worth mentioning that the all-female lineup of pundits, 13 of them, for the recent Women's World Cup did not feature any men. Not a fella in sight. #equality. And the promos for the recent launch of TNT Sports, again, an all-female lineup of stars for the Men's Premier League. How is that equality? Surely it should work both ways. I'm so confused. So, you can agree with him, you can disagree with him, but those attacking Kevin Keegan for daring to have an opinion should be shown the red card and sent down the tunnel for an early bath. This story is balls. What's your view? Mark at gbnews.com. I'll get to your emails shortly. And, of course, my top pundits as well. But with me live in the studio is Olympic gymnast and TV personality Lisa Mason. Do you think Kevin Keegan is out of order?
Do you know what? I'm going to not even sit on the fence, because I think he has a valid point. However, most of the people that are supporting the sport are not professionals, and they don't have a clue what's going on half the time, let's be honest.
Myself included when I'm at the Spurs Stadium.
Exactly. I think, you know, if it was just, I don't want to say the word regular female commentating on it, then I could understand the upset. But these are established footballers themselves, and I still think, obviously, people are still looking down on women's football as it is, and it's still kind of a second-hand joke to a lot of people, even though they have proved themselves multiple times. And I think he's definitely one of those people that is looking down on the women's England football team.
I mean, to be fair to Kevin, you know, he did talk up women's football. He thinks it's brilliant. I mean, you are a top gymnast, Olympic gymnast.
Yep.
And what I'm saying in that Take a 10, tell me if you disagree, because, you know, you're the expert, OK? But if there was commentary, or if there were pundits watching your performance in the Olympics, I would expect it to be women who have done what you're currently doing on the bars.
Well, actually, there are people that are commentating that have never done high-level gymnastics in their life that currently comment on the World Championships that have just happened. I mean, tennis, football, you're pretty much doing the same thing. Gymnastics is very different. You know, the skills are very different. The equipment's very different. So it's difficult, but you do have men commenting on the women's gymnastics and vice versa. But as I said, there are people that have never even played the sport and at a high level that are commentating.
See, if I had, maybe that's the problem. But, you know, if I was watching tennis, I'm a big fan of tennis. I love women's tennis.
Yes.
I'd rather hear what Martina Navratilova has to say about women's tennis than John McEnroe. You know, that I think it's you're the pundit on the sport that you've done.
Absolutely.
I mean, can you compare?
But why can't you have both?
Well, here's a question. Let's imagine it's the Champions League final. Can you compare? Let's imagine it's Manchester United versus Real Madrid in the Champions League final. Can you compare having Roy Keane commentating on that game, given that he participated in the Champions League for Manchester United, versus the England women's captain? Can you make that comparison? You know, is that the same? Are they comparable?
But when Roy did when he was competing, it was many, many years ago, it's completely different. So you can put it hand in hand with that.
Interesting.
You know, and I just think they're both educated opinions. I don't understand why we can't have them both and have different views, because I think that's what makes it more interesting, because
Well, that's it. Well, look, it's all about opinions, which is why I want to hang on to you for the moment, if you would, Lisa. Stare down the barrel of that camera, because let's bring in Fleet Street legend Nina Mishkov, historian David Oldroyd-Bolt, and journalist Linda Jubilee. What do you think about this, David? Is Kevin Keegan a sexist dinosaur?
I don't think sexist dinosaur is a term. He's symptomatic of a view that maintained until relatively recently. And I understand your instinct to leap to his defence, because you don't want a man to be taken off air for airing what is a perfectly normal and well-held view among men of his vintage. I don't see why it requires you to be of either sex to comment, or rather to be a man to comment on men's sport, a woman to comment on women's sport. If it's the same game, at the same level, then you have an equally applicable reason to be commentating on that. If you've played for England, you have the right to comment either way. I just don't see what the fuss is here. Kevin Keegan is a 72-year-old man saying something that most 72-year-old men interested in football would believe intrinsically. Doesn't make them bad people, just means they're of their time. And I'm sure that someone out there, some enterprising channel, will provide football coverage where it is only men commentating on men's games and only women commentating on women's games, and then those people who are most comfortable with that will have a view, or rather have a channel to go to, and then if they want to tune in where it's a man and a woman commentating, there'll be some other channel for it. The idea that it should be cancelled for it is obviously ludicrous, and anybody mitigating for that is doing so in bad faith and ought to be ignored. But I think you slightly missed the point, if I may, that it's not about, well, men have been at this level doing it. Anybody who has played at an international level is more than qualified to comment on football at an international level.
Linda, you're nodding your head.
Because I completely agree with this. The one thing I think David has been now is very, very measured and very fair about his comment on Kevin Keegan. It really annoyed me, I can tell you, but that's just an emotional view, not a rational one. The fact of the matter is, it doesn't, as David says, matter which sex a person is. They're commenting on the game. So I don't care whether John McEnroe comments on Emma Raducanu, and I don't care whether a woman comments on a football match. I mean, after all, when you think about it, no one worries that Dan Walker was originally a sports anchor and is now a news anchor. Probably, I'm not completely sure about this, but probably has never been in a foreign correspondent in his life, for example. So I think it's about the content. Do you understand the content? Do you understand football? Do you understand tennis? Do you understand news? It's about the content. It doesn't really matter what sex the person is.
Oh, listen, I'm outnumbered by my own guests tonight. What do you think about this, Nina?
Well, the thing is, as David said, he's a generation of my generation, as it happens. And I'm wondering if he's slightly peeved because, although I care nothing about football, I admire what the Lionesses have done, might be slightly peeved that for all the money that's spent on these pampered footballers and all the fuss and hoo-ha and millions of pounds and all of that, the women have actually been far more successful than the men. And I think, because it's a very sexist, it is a terribly sexist industry, that he may have had his nose out of joint because of that. And so whinging on about women is what he's done.
All right, fascinating. Well, look, there you go. This show is all about diverse opinion. It's probably the only show on telly where all the guests disagree with the host, and that's how I love it. But what do you think? You hold the balance of power. You are judge and jury. Do you think that Kevin Keegan is a sexist dinosaur? Mark at gbnews.com. Lisa, thank you for coming in to see us. We'll catch up soon. Coming up, fascinating conversation I'm going to be having. Do you think that Rishi Sunak's clear definition of what a woman is will secure him the female vote at the next election? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, BBC TV legend, the one, the only Sue Cook. She's next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Kevin Keegan, not a big fan of women being pundits in relation to men's football. Is he a sexist dinosaur? Well, I love this show because of you. This show belongs to you, and I love the emails that you send in. It's always the highlight. mark@gbnews.com. And I've had so many emails from women saying the following. June says, Mark, I agree with Kevin Keegan. I do not like women commentating on men's football. I'm a woman. They have their games. Let them deal with those. Valerie says, hi, Mark, I'm a woman and I much prefer to hear the voice of a man commenting on male football. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't require justification to have a women. Maurice says, you need to take cricket as an example, Mark. Men and women commentate on both, i.e. you have men with women on the men's game and vice versa. Get a grip, says Maurice. I could go on, but how about this? Last one from an unnamed. Listening to female commentators on men's top football matches, as well as female anchors on the side of the pitch, interviewing experienced male presenters is just not right. Keep those emails coming, mark@gbnews.com. But it's time now for the newsmaker, and in a bid to capitalise on Sir Keir Starmer's difficulties in defining what a biological woman is, Rishi Sunak laid it out in no uncertain terms in his conference speech on Wednesday. Take a listen.
They shouldn't get bullied into believing that people can be any sex they want to be. They can't. A man is a man and a woman is a woman. That's just common sense.
So will Rishi Sunak's clear, no-nonsense definition of a woman win him the female vote at the next election? Let's get the views of tonight's newsmaker, former BBC star, broadcaster and journalist Sue Cook. Sue, it's crazy that we need politicians to confirm what we were taught in GCSE biology, but will it help Rishi Sunak at the next election?
Well, it went down very well in conference, didn't it? So it probably will get some votes. But on the other hand, it's obviously gone down very badly with the trans lobby, the very vocal trans lobby. And I think, well, for me, it's just a little bit transparent. It's a little bit, I'm going to say this because I think it's going to get me some votes. It's not a terribly sensible thing to say, actually, a man is a man and a woman is a woman, because there are a lot of trans women who are completely acceptable as women. If they want to be women, that's fine. And vice versa. I can't see anything wrong with that. The only thing is, I think any individuals with male bodies and male hormones should not ever have a part in any female sports events. They shouldn't be in female wards in hospitals. They shouldn't be going into places where women changing rooms. They shouldn't go into women's prisons. All that sort of thing makes total sense to me. But I think it's a bit simplistic just to stand there to try and get votes and just say a man is a man and a woman is a woman. There's a lot more to say than it just sells it short.
Well, I do agree with you, but don't you think it will chime with the female electorate that Sunak can define a woman and Sir Keir Starmer cannot?
Well, I don't think he did define a woman, did he? He just said a man's a man and a woman is a woman. I know a couple of really lovely trans women, very talented people. One's a musician, one's a broadcaster. They are not militant. They feel very upset about all the fact that the bad press that they're all getting because of the activist lobby.
Yeah.
And I think it's simplistic for me just to say a man's a man, a woman is a woman, so just to get votes.
Fair enough. Now, Sue, scores of much-loved BBC local radio presenters are signing off for the last time as the BBC drastically reduces its local radio output, with many shows now simulcast and networked across the country. Some local radio output, for example, just features Radio 5 Live. So, Sue, isn't local radio one of the things that we pay our licence fee for?
I feel really strongly about this. Just this week, two people have finally bowed out of lovely, long-standing radio jobs. Paul Miller from Radio Solent and John Gilmore from the BBC Radio Lancashire, both gone this week. And also this week, Sir Mark Thompson, who used to be the DG at the BBC, he's done a podcast with my old boss, Roger Bolton, also saying that he regrets the demise of local radio and that something ought to be done about it. You know, local radio is so important to people. If you've got to feel part of a community, part of where you live, and localities are different. So if you want to know about local events, local weather, you need good local journalism with local stories to make you feel that you're part of you've got a relationship with your radio, really. And a lot of people who haven't got very good mobility, they haven't got very good sight, maybe, they need the radios. The radios are a really important companion. I'm a patron of a charity called the British Wireless for the Blind Fund, and I know how important radio is, and local radio, to people who can't see very well.
Most definitely, it's company. It's also important local information about crime, activities that are going on. You're so right. You mentioned Paul Miller, John Gilmore, legends of local radio broadcasting, chucked on the scrap heap, in some cases after 2, 3 or 4 decades of wonderful service. And of course, the other thing, Sue, is what a great breeding ground local radio is for future broadcasters, legends like yourself. So, Sue, I look forward to catching up really soon. Thank you for drawing our attention to that important story. My thanks there to Sue Cook, former BBC star journalist and broadcaster. Coming up next, we've got the papers with full pundit reaction. Don't go anywhere.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's exactly 10:30 sharp. We've got the papers on the way, but let me just shout out to Mescana today, brilliant member of my team, who spent a lot of time sweating over the big opinion monologue. It took a lot of editing. If you haven't seen it, it's on Twitter now, @GB News. On Monday, I made my alternative Prime Minister's speech. On Wednesday, Rishi Sunak did his, and Mescana spent the afternoon editing the two together, so well done her. OK, it's time now for this. Yes, indeed, tomorrow's papers. The Mail newspaper, menopause madness. Dozens of councils, universities, police forces and fire services have male menopause policies the Mail can reveal in what critics say is a further erosion of women's rights. A string of public bodies have drawn up woke protocols that insist men may also experience menopause symptoms. Also, a deeply troubling story. We can't go into the details, but here's the headline in the Mail. Holly Willoughby kidnap plot suspect tried to hire a hitman in America. Daily Express, and this is the main story. There is now a police investigation underway, but a man charged with hitman plot to kill Holly Willoughby. A truly chilling and devastating headline. Heartbreaking, Sir Alex's Tower of Strength wife, Kathy, dies at 84. Had a great chat with Michael Crick, Sir Alex's biographer, earlier tonight. She was a remarkable lady and very much the steel that underpinned Sir Alex Ferguson's great life and great career. The Sun newspaper, and look, this is a big story. Stop Gear. BBC axed the show after Freddie horror. BBC chiefs have axed Top Gear 10 months after host Andrew Freddie Flintoff's horror crash whilst filming. A source said it's been an institution on British telly, but the feeling is there's no way it can continue. I'll discuss that with my pundits shortly. Dad of two, aged 36, charged. US hitman plot to murder Holly Willoughby. The Times newspaper, Arnie, my new life as a self-help guru. Also, one of their columnists, I'm not rich enough to have a baby. Well, many of us aren't, let me tell you. NHS must modernise or die, say Labour. The NHS must modernise or die. The Labour Party will warn tomorrow as it pledges to double the number of diagnostic scanners in hospitals to give tens of thousands of patients faster access to life-saving treatment. Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, said his party would save the health service from an existential crisis that had left people unable to rely on it in emergencies. Prue Leaf, my husband wishes he'd married Mary Berry. Well, don't we all? Daily Telegraph. This is a shocking story, actually. Let's just change gear slightly for a moment. Rapists wrongly labelled as women by police. Police have wrongly labelled hundreds of suspected rapists as women, the Daily Telegraph can reveal, despite the Home Secretary saying they should not do so. Figures obtained under the Freedom of Information Act show for the first time the scale of police adopting the self-declared gender of alleged sex attackers. Over the past 4 years, police forces have referred 260 females to the Crown Prosecution Service to consider a charge of rape. I can't believe I'm saying those words out loud. Plot to kidnap and kill Holly Willoughby is in the Daily Telegraph as well. Body of boy aged 10 found as missiles hit Kharkiv in Ukraine. Metro Bank calls for calm after share crash. And cold symptoms can linger just like COVID. Long colds may exist and are just as common as long COVID. Well, there's a surprise. Daily Mirror, accused in the dock, hitman from US was to kill Holly Willoughby. A security guard plotted to murder TV star, court is told. Those are your front pages. Let's get full pundit reaction now. I'm delighted to be joined by Fleet Street legend Nina Mishkov, historian and political commentator David Oldroyd-Bolt, and journalist and broadcaster, star of the hit podcast The Common Sense podcast, Linda Jubilee. Folks, lots of stories to get through. We are not able to speak in any detail about this devastating story about Holly Willoughby, so let's move straight on. And can we go to the NHS, David? It must modernise or die, say Labour. Is Keir Starmer the man to rescue our National Health Service?
Well, I've long held it as a truism of British politics that it is only the Labour Party that will ever have any possibility of reforming the NHS, because it is only the Labour Party that will be trusted to do so, whether that is true or not, or whether that is correct or not. I should hope, deeply hope, that Keir Starmer is serious about this and it's not simply a way to get more votes from the people, because the NHS is crumbling around us. And if the people seem, as they are in every poll, wedded to this idea of a nationalised health service, free at the point of use regardless of people's lifestyle choices, then I suppose it must be Labour that does it. I would much rather that people woke up and saw that this is a failed model that cannot possibly succeed in the 21st century, that every other health system in Europe gives better clinical outcomes, and that we are killing ourselves because of this purblindness. But as that seems unlikely to happen, it's got to be Starmer.
David's exactly right. The problem is the National Health Service was developed and set up when people retired at 60 and died at 65. Now, it's not that the model's bad, it's just that society has changed. And now people retire at 60 and they live to 85, 90, 92. And that's the pressure on the NHS. And tinkering around the edges, whether you're installing more scanning equipment, whether you're getting kids to be supervised brushing their teeth to reduce the stress on the NHS, none of these things are going to actually work until you properly address it in a wholesale, systematic way.
And it ain't about money, is it?
Well, it is about money. It's always about money.
We can't put more money into the NHS, surely.
It's not about money. It's about
It's the model.
Money is important, though, because you need money to pay the doctors, the consultants,
Can it go
the nurses.
beyond 180 billion, which it currently is?
Well, Labour is promising to spend £170 million a year over the next Parliament on new MRI and CT scanners, because he reckons that early diagnosis, as we all know, is... And Wes Streeting has backed this up by saying that he himself got early diagnosis for his kidney cancer, you know, the shadow health secretary. So they, you know, people know this.
But I object to this idea that we put more money in, David, because it's a money pit.
To do what? You reorganise it. You have
OK,
to
reorganise, but no more cash.
After government of both stripes has tried reorganisation. You can only reorganise the deck chairs on the Titanic so much before realising that they're sliding down the deck because the damn thing's about to go into the Atlantic.
Well, I hate to be controversial, but maybe we could start some charging and get some revenue in that way.
But that means that my viewers and listeners will pay twice. That's not fair either.
But would they rather pay once for a health service that works, which is a mixed model, which is what everywhere else in Europe and most of the world does, or would they rather continuing to pay as they are now through their taxes and get a substandard service? Because that is the choice. It is so stark and it is so really life and death that we need to stop pussyfooting around the issue and pretending that there is some way, through reorganisation, refunding or retraining, that this model can survive.
People do not want, you know, private healthcare coming in via American companies.
But it's not just the choice between America and Britain. That's a false dichotomy.
No, but that is the danger, isn't it?
Overcome this fear of the private sector. If they make healthcare cheaper, why not?
Well, because they are in it to make money.
And consequently, they want better outcomes.
They are not in it to make people live longer or make people's lives healthier or better. They are there. It is putting profit before people.
But there's plenty
and that's
of
what's wrong with this country.
There's plenty of other countries in the world.
We don't have a crisis of finance. We have a crisis of greed.
Of course we have a finance of crisis.
We do.
Sorry, financing crisis.
I'm saying, of course we have that. But actually, if you reposition it and call it a crisis of greed, because the last 13 years we have been subjected to greed from a Tory government which has put profits before people.
And unprecedented spending in the NHS, and it's not making us any more well, Linda.
Because it's not about the spending on the NHS, it's about devising a new model. And there's plenty of health services all over the world. It's not just America that have different models that do work very successfully, and maybe we should be taking a look at those.
Germany as well, of course, it's a private insurance scheme in which those businesses are forced to provide insurance for those on the lowest income.
Or look at Japan and how it handles its elderly population. That's worth looking at.
Very good instance.
Well, OK, can I ask you, Nina, is there such a thing as a female rapist?
Well, there has been in the past, actually.
But you would be referring
there was a
to
very exotic case back in the 70s or 80s.
And that would be a biological woman that was
yes.
accused of rape.
Raping a man.
Yes, absolutely.
What?
It was one of those tabloid headlines, and I can't remember, but it was one of those very.
There are examples.
Yeah.
Women sometimes will attack a man.
Yeah.
And actually, I do remember a couple of stories of that ilk. But what about
That's
this?
not what this story is.
What about
No,
this,
absolutely
Nina?
not.
What about the police officially notifying, labelling biological males who have been accused of rape as women? Does that wash with you?
No, it doesn't actually. It really doesn't. This is just nonsense, basically, because women are look whatever you call it, whoever is the perpetrator, women are the ones who suffer. We are the ones who are the victims.
Correct.
And I think we should be able to say who are perpetrators and who the rapists are.
How have they even made this mistake? I can't really get my head
Well, I don't think it's a mistake. I think it's politics. And I just wonder, Linda, whether this is a slander on all women. Every time you read a headline that says, woman arrested after attacking someone in the park, of a sexual nature, it's not a woman and it's a lie that it is.
You mean you've got a rapist, an alleged rapist, they go into the prison, they take all these statements, and the rapist, who is biologically a man, says, I'm not a man, I'm a woman.
And they're logged as a woman.
And they get to the forms and they're logged as a woman.
They're logged as a woman.
That's this story, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Figures obtained under the Freedom of Information Act show for the first time the scale of police adopting the self-declared gender of alleged sex attackers. Over the past 4 years, police forces have referred 260 so-called females to the Crown Prosecution Service to be considered for rape.
Do you know what I think? I think they should abandon that and start getting more convictions for rape. That's what the police need to do.
Correct.
It's because it's what, under 3%?
It's 2 or 3%.
David, I think that all of womankind could come together and collectively sue anybody that refers to a rapist as a woman that's a biological male, because it is a slander on womankind, isn't it?
I think this is why the one bit of the Prime Minister's speech at the conference that was actually worth having and hearing is his insistence that a woman biologically is a woman and a man biologically is a man. Because the whole nonsense would cease if we simply averred that biological truism.
But you cannot just say it is black and white. It is not like that.
It's not black and white.
It's not black and white. There are areas of grey, and people must feel comfortable in their own bodies and living their genuine lives that they want to live.
I'm sorry, I disagree. It is that excess of compassion that has led us to a situation where you can have...
They can't have too much.
I'm sorry, you can, because this is why you end up with people, men in female prisons, attacking female prisoners because they have... And it is that compassion which is perfectly well placed, but or rather perfectly well intended, but misplaced, that has led to that situation. I understand it, but I think it is the reason for it.
But it's actually very clear. If someone is genuinely of a confused gender, like the young woman we had on the programme several weeks ago when I was in and we were talking, she was born with very, very tiny sort of split penis, if I can put it that way, when her testis is hidden inside her body. The surgeons made a decision to make her, castrate her and make her female.
Oh, I know the case,
and
it was horrific.
And there's lots of, it's called collateral extrophy, I think. And that happens, that does happen. And it also happens.
Exceptionally minutely rarely.
It's exceptionally minute, but not so minute are the number of people that are genuinely born in the wrong bodies, and they feel like they're born in the wrong bodies.
Absolutely.
And they go through therapy, they go through hormone treatment, they go through surgery. I think they can call themselves female if they've gone that far.
Absolutely.
Well, you as women have more of a right than I.
Absolutely.
But my view is that the epidemic of men calling themselves women for political and criminal purposes is a result of this.
I agree with you there. That is wrong.
I don't think it's an epidemic. I don't think we need to get hysterical.
Do you think we'd be having this discussion 15 years ago, or would we look forward and think this is utter lunacy?
No.
How have we reached this stage? The numbers in that Telegraph piece are truly disgusting.
And they're only going to grow, Nina.
Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Well, not if we decide that that cannot happen anymore.
No, it's not for you to dictate what people... what a human being perceive themselves to be and how they want to live their lives.
No, but it's for society to say that in the majority of cases this is true, or we abandon objective reality.
Nobody can transition and nobody can change sex.
There are such infinitesimally small numbers taken as a whole of the population that, as Linda said, those must be taken into account. But self-identification is not that way.
But then why, if it's such a small number, why are you worried about it?
Because that is not the number we're talking about. The number we're talking about here is those who self-identify, because we've abandoned a grip of objective truth and reality and allowed people to self-identify. That is clearly what has occurred for police England.
Who else is to make that decision?
It's such an extraordinary story.
Who else
and
is?
another
I think
thing that we should concentrate on is maybe identifying misogyny in their own ranks.
No doubt, no doubt. What do you think about this, folks? Mark at gbnews.com. Can a biological male be called a woman rapist? Is there such a thing as a woman rapist if you're referring to an intact biological man? Let me know your thoughts. Also, we've been conducting a Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll. Is Keegan right that only men should commentate on men's football? The results are in. That's next. Plus, my pundits will be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros. Plus, more front pages. All of that's next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan Tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, thank you to Dominique for firing up the Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll. We've got the results. They are in. Is Keegan right that only men should commentate on men's football? Well, 72.5% say yes and 27.5% say no. So the public back Keegan, and Linda Jubilee's mouth has dropped to the floor. She can't believe it. Let's get full reaction to the big stories of the day. Fleet Street legend Nina Mishkov. We've got David Oldroyd-Bolt, top historian and broadcaster and journalist Linda Jubilee. When you are ready, folks, let's have a look at the Star. I don't know if it's up yet, but if not, we'll go to it shortly. Oh, there it is. Well done. Look at that. As if by magic. A heartache for Sir Alex as beloved wife Cathy dies. Fergie's agony. Sir Alex Ferguson is in mourning after his wife of 57 years died at the age of 84. The ex-Man United boss described Lady Cathy as his bedrock of stability. And you just have to say, don't you, Linda, poor Sir Alex, on his own at home tonight. This woman was his life.
I know, and you and I were talking earlier about the Beckham documentary, which launched this week on Netflix. I've watched 3 of
Got everyone talking.
hours. It's fantastic, I think. But what's really clear, it spends a lot of time with Sir Alex Ferguson. It's got some excellent interviews with him. It's really his whole life is football and family. And what I can say about his view of football is that Manchester United was a family and he kept everyone together. And so this loss will be enormous to him because, as Michael Crick said earlier in the programme, he valued his wife so much for holding everything together, and he tried to instil this in the players as well.
Yeah.
And it points out that he was actually against Beckham's marriage to Victoria because he worried that their marriage wouldn't have the kind of strength and durability that his own has. He's been proved wrong about that, but it must be a tremendous loss to him.
Really tough, Nina, to move on from your partner of 57 years. Where do you go from there?
How can you begin to imagine? Because that's his whole adult life.
Yeah.
That's his whole adult life. And
I think they met as teenagers.
Yes,
that's how early it goes back.
And the thing is, she was a strong Glaswegian woman, you know, and Glasgow women are strong. I mean, Richard Branson's
mother.
No, his wife, Joan, is the only woman he's terrified of.
That would do it. Nina, can I ask you about this big showbiz story? And you've covered, of course, the journalistic showbiz brief for many years. Stop Gear. BBC axes Top Gear after Freddie Flintoff crash horror. This is a big story. I mean, this is one of the most valuable franchises in British TV, isn't it?
Well, it survived the Clarkson affair and the going. So it's been going and going and going and going. And this was a horrific crash. I saw a photograph recently of the actual... It looked dreadful. I interviewed Freddie last year, just over a year ago, for The Times.
Just before it happened?
No, because it happened last December. So I interviewed him perhaps about May or something like that. He was presenting an ITV sports contest programme, and he was absolutely delightful. I mean, what a warm-hearted, lovely man, smart, very funny, very self-deprecating, had conquered his demons, the drink,
alcohol and drugs.
all of that, conquered all of that and come out the other side, and is such a mentor to young cricketers, and he made that terrific programme. And it seems so tragic. And you seriously, you look at the photograph of him and you think, God, such a handsome guy. And he's still handsome, but how hard must it be for him, who's, physically very, very fit? Mind you, I said to him, how fit are you? He said, oh, God, he said, I'm aching here, I'm aching there, I've broken this, I've broken that. Down the years, but, here I am.
More power to him. I've worked with him, and you're right, he's an absolute gentleman. I wish him a speedy recovery, and it seems appropriate for Top Gear to stop. Nina and David and Linda, let's power through your headline heroes and back page zeros. So, briefly, if you can, Nina, who's your headline hero?
My hero is Naomi Campbell, bizarrely. She's just been announced as the subject of a major exhibition next year at the V&A.
Yes.
She was, all her diva moments from the past, forget that. This is a woman who really has achieved an awful lot. She was the first black woman to on the cover of Vogue. She's gone through racism, she's gone through everything else, and there she still is.
And she even put up with Robert De Niro for a few months, and almost no one can survive that. David, briefly, if you can, your headline hero.
My headline hero is Sir Nicholas Coleridge, who's just been appointed Provost of Eton, and his because today he gave an interview in the Telegraph in which he resurrected the great British art of mickey-taking in the most phenomenal manner by saying that he couldn't possibly understand why anybody who hadn't been to Eton hadn't gone, and that 8 out of his 10 best friends were, and it has annoyed exactly the right people. It's punctured the horrible earnestness of public life in this country. It made a lot of people laugh who got the joke, and it's annoyed all the people who couldn't get it. Well done, Nick.
The irony-free zone from all of those woke lefties.
Yes.
Linda, your headline hero.
Narges Mohammadi, who was today awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her role in supporting women, oppressed women in Iran. She's been in prison for 10 years. And at one stage, she was sentenced to 154 lashes for the kind of thing she did. I can't think of any woman at the moment who has shown more courage.
OK.
And I hope that keeps her safe. They can't get rid of her, surely. Well, with the eyes of the world upon her now.
Now, let me tell you that the back page zeros are in. The nominations are there, and we've got, let's have a look, Suella Braverman from Nina and Rishi Sunak from David. Last but not least, Mike Jeffries, your back page zero. Who is he and why?
He is the former CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, and he is allegedly the person that organised corporate parties where young male models were pimped around. Now, I say allegedly because I know we've got to be careful about this, but the fact of the matter that all these goings-on at corporate events, you know, and there have been many, I've known about many in the past that don't come to the public attention. I think they've all got to stop.
Amazing stuff. Well, that's a good nomination, plus their polo shirts are way overpriced. Can I thank Nina, David and Linda, brilliant pundits tonight. Please come back soon. Most importantly, you for your company. Headliners is back next, and I'll see you at 9.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. This weekend is going to be one of contrast across the UK. High pressure is in charge across the south, importing heat from North Africa and Iberia, really turning very warm for the time of year. But this trailing frontal system across Scotland is going to be providing much wetter conditions. It will eventually clear off parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England throughout this evening and then stall across central western areas of Scotland repeatedly. Heavy rain overnight. Elsewhere, generally staying largely dry, some clear spells in there, but most of us seeing relatively mild conditions to start Saturday morning around 14 degrees Celsius. This rain then will be heavy and persistent throughout Saturday, and there is an amber weather warning in force, potential for flooding